preseason game. What are your thoughts? Are you surprised by this? Did you think they would go with Shedeur? Did you like what you see from either quarterback? Is there any kind of a telltale that you can give us?
I couldn't give you a telltale. I would say I like Shedeur, though. I think if it's close, I think you always go young. But I think he's put enough out there on tapes to where I would say he should have got the nod. But I'm not in their camp. I didn't see what they saw. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I think he'll end up taking it over at some point.
You know, when a guy is like Deshaun was a Pro Bowl player, having such great success at his old location, and then he comes to a new location. And it wasn't the fact that he went to a new location. Jay, you know when they give you money, the expectation is exponentially through the roof.
For sure,
the first guy to have a fully guaranteed contract, $230 million. Everybody thought it was going to shift the paradigm that now everybody's about to get guaranteed contracts.
Yeah, no doubt.
To this day, he's still the only one that has a fully guaranteed $230 million contract. And for whatever reason, we've talked about it on the show, 19 starts in 5 years. He's played 19 games in 5 years. It's hard, and I tell people this. When you're a professional, you got to do that thing over and over. It's got to be monotonous. You can't take no time off like that and think you're going to pick up where you left off.
The Cleveland Browns thought they had already made their quarterback decision, but now that decision is getting challenged from a completely different direction. This is no longer just Browns fans arguing online, Cleveland radio hosts questioning the move, or national analysts debating whether Shedeur Sanders deserved a better shot. Now, an actual Pro Bowl defensive back who lined up against Cleveland is publicly saying that, from what he saw, Shedeur Sanders should have gotten the nod over Deshaun Watson. And when that player is Jaylon Johnson, one of the better defensive backs in football, that opinion carries a little more weight than somebody screaming into a microphone from a studio. That is what makes this situation so uncomfortable for Cleveland. Jaylon Johnson is not part of the Browns organization. He is not trying to win favor with Browns fans. He is not fighting for Shedeur Sanders to get more media attention.
It's a long season. Shedeur eventually is going to get his time to shine, whether it's this year, next year, it don't matter. But we never praying on nobody's downfall, and we wish the best for everybody. You're never going to succeed if you have bad intentions in your heart and your mind, and if you wish bad on somebody else, bro. Like, no matter what the situation is, that's not how you succeed.
He plays defense for another NFL team, and his entire job is built around studying quarterbacks, reading their eyes, understanding timing, recognizing hesitation, and figuring out who can actually hurt a defense. So when somebody with that background comes away thinking Shedeur Sanders had already shown enough to deserve the starting job, Cleveland cannot just brush that aside like another random hot take. Johnson also brought up the part of this quarterback battle that might be the hardest thing for Browns fans to ignore. If the competition between Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders was truly close, why would Cleveland automatically choose the older quarterback? If two players are giving you similar results, one of them is a veteran whose story in Cleveland has already included injuries, missed games, inconsistency, and massive expectations, while the other is a young quarterback who still has room to develop. In that situation, choosing the younger player at least gives you the chance to find out whether he can become something bigger. And that is exactly where this starts becoming more than just another Shedeur Sanders debate. Because Cleveland has spent months talking about competition. They have talked about development. They have talked about earning opportunities. They have talked about putting players in position to prove themselves. But once the quarterback decision arrived, Deshaun Watson ended up on top anyway. That is why Johnson's reaction matters. From outside the building, it does not sound like everybody looked at the same evidence and automatically reached the same conclusion.
All right, man. So we already know there's a bunch going on when it comes to this Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson, QB1 debacle that took place. Deshaun Watson didn't even win a position. He stunk it up in the last game. He just threw the fans under the bus. The fans of Cleveland, Ohio are pissed about it.
The most interesting part is that Johnson is not pretending he knows everything happening inside Cleveland. He understands that the Browns coaches have seen practices he did not see. They have meetings, playbook evaluations, communication checks, and countless details that an opposing player would never have access to. But even with that acknowledgement, his football opinion still leans toward Shedeur Sanders. That tells you something. Based on what Sanders actually put on tape, Johnson believes there was enough there to justify giving the young quarterback the opportunity. And think about who is making that evaluation. Defensive backs live off quarterback mistakes. They study whether a passer locks onto his first read. They notice when his eyes give away the route. They know when a quarterback panics under pressure, when he is late over the middle, and when he has enough confidence to move through a progression instead of forcing the first thing he sees. Jaylon Johnson has spent his career trying to make quarterbacks uncomfortable. If he watched Sanders and came away believing there was something worth betting on, Browns fans are naturally going to listen. That creates an even bigger problem for Deshaun Watson, because Watson is not being compared to some finished product. He is being compared to a young quarterback who is still developing, still learning, and still trying to prove that he belongs. Normally, the veteran should have a major advantage in that kind of competition. He should know more, process faster, command the offense better, and leave very little doubt about who deserves to start. But if respected NFL defenders are looking at the battle and saying Sanders should have gotten the job, then maybe this was never as clear as Cleveland wants everybody to believe. And now the pressure changes completely. Watson is not simply entering the season as Cleveland's starter. He is entering it with Shedeur Sanders sitting directly behind him while more and more people question whether the right quarterback was chosen in the first place. Every stalled drive is going to be examined. Every missed throw is going to create noise.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I feel like not only the injury, I think the off-the-field things started to kind of seep in a little bit, yeah, mentally. Because, I mean, when he left Houston, he was a dog. So, I mean, I think just everything that happened there, I also don't feel like Houston wanted him to leave. So I think there was some things playing into that. And just to your point, just the mental aspect of it. So when you go in there, you're playing a quarterback and your mind's not right, you got all these different distractions. And then you add on injuries on top of that. I mean, it gets tough. Your performance has no choice really but to go down. But I think, I mean, overall, I hope he succeeds. I mean, I don't wish negative upon any man, but I definitely think that it's only a matter of time.
Hey, JJ, y'all obviously been through OTAs.
Yeah.
Ben Johnson's second year right now. You've been through training camp. Obviously, played 2 preseason games up to date. I'm sure the starters probably won't play in the 3rd preseason game.
Every time the offense struggles, fans are going to remember that an opposing Pro Bowl defender already looked at this situation and came away thinking the younger quarterback deserved the opportunity. That is why Jaylon Johnson stepping into this conversation matters so much. He did not need to attack Watson. He did not need some dramatic speech. Just saying that Sanders had shown enough and that he would lean toward the younger quarterback immediately puts another spotlight on Cleveland's decision. Because now the Browns are not only asking fans to trust that they picked the right starter, they are asking people to ignore what some players who actually faced these quarterbacks believe they saw on the field. And if Shedeur Sanders eventually gets his opportunity and starts producing, this comment is going to look very different later in the season. Jaylon Johnson's opinion hits different because this is not coming from somebody sitting outside the game guessing what quarterbacks look like from a television screen. This is a veteran defensive back who has spent years making a living by studying quarterbacks, baiting quarterbacks, reading their eyes, understanding their timing, and figuring out exactly when they are uncomfortable. That is why his support for Shedeur Sanders should get Cleveland's attention. Johnson is not saying Sanders is perfect. He is not saying Sanders has already proven he is a franchise quarterback. What he is saying is much simpler and much more damaging to the Browns' decision. From what he saw, Shedeur Sanders had put enough on tape to deserve the opportunity. That matters because defensive backs see quarterbacks differently than most fans do. They are not only looking at completion percentage or whether a throw looked pretty. They are watching how fast the ball comes out, whether the quarterback is staring down one receiver, whether he can manipulate coverage with his eyes, whether he stays calm when pressure comes, and whether he can work through a progression without freezing. A player like Johnson spends every week hunting for hesitation. If a quarterback is slow, nervous, predictable, or uncomfortable, defensive backs notice it immediately because that is exactly what they are trained to attack. So when Johnson comes away liking what he saw from Shedeur Sanders, that deserves more attention than Cleveland may want to give it. Especially because this was not some situation where Sanders was clearly miles behind Deshaun Watson and everybody outside the building was just ignoring reality. The whole conversation around this Browns quarterback room has been about how close things supposedly were. The coaches themselves created a competition. Sanders got opportunities. Watson got opportunities. The team spent weeks evaluating both players. And then after all of that, Cleveland decided to go with Watson. That is where Johnson's logic becomes so difficult to argue with.
How has training camp been? How has the preseason been? Obviously, a huge blow, losing, Kobe Bryant, to injury. Defensively, how do you guys feel so far going with the regular season creeping up on us in 2 more weeks?
Yeah, honestly, I think for me, it's hard to get a feel because we got a lot of guys that are hurt, whether they just got hurt or they're coming back from injuries. I mean, like you said, we lost Kobe pretty early, and now we got hopefully Kyler coming back soon. We got Elijah Hicks coming back soon. So I think it's really just been a lot of plug and play. Tyreek Stevenson going to come back soon. I mean, we got a lot of DBs and corners go down. So I think the guys that we've been practicing with the last few weeks are going to look a little different when we get in the season. So I think for us, it's just really picking up where we left off at and just really just keep.
If the difference really was small, why not take the younger quarterback with more room to grow? That does not mean you automatically hand every young player a starting job. It means that when two quarterbacks are giving you similar reasons to believe in them, age and future upside have to matter. One player is still trying to show you what he can become. The other has already been in the league for years, has already played at a high level in the past, and has already given Cleveland a large sample of what this chapter of his career has looked like. And that is the part nobody can hide from. Deshaun Watson's name still carries weight because of what he once was in Houston. At his best, he was dangerous. He could extend plays, make difficult throws, hurt defenses with his legs, and create offense when the structure broke down. But Cleveland is not choosing between 2020 Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. They are choosing between the Watson they have right now and the Sanders they have right now. That distinction changes everything. Watson's Browns run has been defined by interruptions, injuries, long stretches without game action, physical setbacks, and constant attempts to find rhythm again have made it difficult for him to build any real momentum. That does not mean every problem is his fault, and it does not mean he cannot still play good football, but it does mean Cleveland should have needed something convincing from him to shut down this quarterback conversation. They should have needed him to clearly separate himself from Shedeur Sanders. Did that really happen? Because if it did, why are people who actually face this Browns team coming away with a different opinion? Why is Jaylon Johnson looking at the same young quarterback and saying he believes Sanders had already shown enough? Why is there still this much debate after Cleveland supposedly settled the issue? A quarterback competition usually becomes quiet when one player clearly wins it. This one somehow became louder after the decision. And that is what puts Watson in such an uncomfortable position. He is not being asked to beat out an established star quarterback.
I definitely realize that, Shedeur is the favorite. But me, I'm understanding the business aspect of it, looking at it how not just the fans look at it, but how the staff sees it, regardless of how the fans see it. Looks can be deceiving in training camp when you're going against guys that know everything that you're running. I would urge fans not to just look at, if he's throwing an interception or, batted down balls, but how does he move in the pocket? Is he throwing it to the right guy? As it relates to Todd Monken picking a starter, the cat's out the bag, guys. The starter has been picked. He just hasn't come out and said. It's not, just a competition like it's totally up in the wild. Like it could go to him. It could go to him. They have an idea, or more than an idea. I am almost certain of who the starter we're going to be. It's going to be.
He is being asked to stay ahead of a young player who entered this process needing development. If Watson is the veteran, knows the system better, has more NFL experience, and has been through almost every situation a quarterback can face, then the gap should be obvious. Browns fans should be looking at the decision and saying, "We understand exactly why they did it." Instead, Johnson's comments add another layer of doubt, because he is basically looking at Cleveland's situation from the defender's side of the ball and seeing value in Sanders that the Browns either did not value enough or did not trust yet. And those are two very different things. If Cleveland believes Sanders simply needs more time, that is understandable. Young quarterbacks develop at different speeds, but if the Browns are holding him back despite believing the competition was close, then eventually people are going to start asking what exactly he has to do to get a real chance. That question becomes even bigger once the regular season starts. Training camp opinions can be debated forever. Preseason performances can be picked apart from every direction, but regular season football does not care about any of that. If Watson moves the offense, protects the ball, creates explosive plays, and wins games, Cleveland's decision will look justified. But if the offense starts dragging, the boos get louder, and the same problems show up again. Shedeur Sanders becomes the biggest story on the sideline without even taking a snap. The biggest problem for Cleveland is that Jaylon Johnson did not just praise Shedeur Sanders. His comments also put a giant spotlight back on Deshaun Watson and what the Browns are actually betting on right now. Because if an opposing Pro Bowl defensive back believes Sanders had already shown enough to deserve the starting job, then Cleveland's decision to go with Watson suddenly becomes something they have to prove on the field, not something fans are just supposed to accept. And this is where the pressure on Watson gets very real. He is not walking into this season as some untouchable veteran who clearly dominated the competition. He is walking into it with questions everywhere. The Browns have seen the injuries, they have seen the long stretches without consistent football. They have seen the uneven performances. They have seen how difficult it has been for him to regain the same rhythm and explosiveness people remember from his Houston days. None of that means he cannot still play well, but it absolutely means Cleveland needed him to separate himself clearly from Shedeur Sanders if they wanted this decision to feel clean. That is what makes the situation so strange. If Watson had gone out there and completely outplayed Sanders every day, this conversation would be dead. Nobody would care what Jaylon Johnson said. Nobody would be asking why the younger quarterback did not get the nod. Browns fans might still want to see Shedeur eventually, but there would at least be a clear football reason for starting Watson. Instead, Johnson's comments make it sound like somebody outside the building watched Sanders and saw enough to wonder why Cleveland went another direction. And remember what Watson is being judged against. This is not a quarterback with 10 years of NFL starting experience chasing him. This is a young player who is still learning the offense, still getting comfortable with NFL speed, still adjusting to how quickly windows close, and still trying to prove that he can command a team. The veteran should have every natural advantage in that battle. He should know more. He should process faster. He should understand protections better. He should be cleaner getting the offense lined up. If the competition is still close, despite all of that, then that alone should make Cleveland nervous. Because what happens when Shedeur gets more experience? That is the question hanging over this entire situation. If Sanders is already close enough for a player like Jaylon Johnson to say he should have gotten the starting job, what happens after another month of practice? What happens after he gets more time in the system? What happens when he gets comfortable with the terminology, starts seeing coverages faster, and improves the exact operational details Cleveland keeps talking about? The Browns may have named Watson the starter, but that does not mean this competition is going away. If anything, it may have just moved into a different phase. Now every Watson mistake will be compared to what Shedeur might have done. Every slow offensive start will bring the same question. Every missed third down opportunity will have people looking toward the sideline. That is not because Sanders has already proven he is better. It is because Cleveland left the door open by making a decision that so many people still do not understand. Once there is doubt around a quarterback choice, it does not disappear quietly. Winning shuts it up. Good football shuts it up. Everything else makes it louder. And Watson is carrying another burden that Sanders does not have: expectations. Cleveland made one of the biggest quarterback investments in league history when they brought him in. The money, the contract, the attention, everything around that move created a standard that was always going to be enormous. When you get paid like that, people are not expecting you to barely win a quarterback battle against a young player. They are expecting you to look like the obvious answer. That is why the old Houston version of Watson keeps becoming part of this conversation. People remember what he looked like then. They remember the athletic plays, the confidence, the ability to extend drives, the dangerous throws outside structure. But the Browns cannot start a memory at quarterback. They have to start the player standing in their building right now. And if current Watson is not clearly better than current Shedeur Sanders, then Jaylon Johnson's point becomes harder and harder to ignore. The Browns also have to understand what this does inside the fan base. Fans already had strong opinions about this competition. Some believed Shedeur was winning it. Some believed Watson's experience should matter more. Some just wanted Cleveland to choose somebody and move forward. But now there is outside validation for the Shedeur side of the argument. It is one thing when fans say, "We think Sanders deserved it." It is another when a high-level NFL defender looks at the situation and says he would have leaned the same way. That is where this could become dangerous for Cleveland if the season starts badly. The leash on Watson will feel shorter than a normal veteran starter's leash because the backup already has attention, support, and momentum around his name. If Watson comes out sharp and wins, this all calms down. But if he struggles, the Browns are going to hear the same question every single week. How long are you going to keep Shedeur Sanders waiting? And this is where the Browns' entire explanation starts getting harder to understand. If Cleveland's biggest concern with Shedeur Sanders is command of the offense, communication in the huddle, getting the play out cleanly, understanding where everybody needs to be, and handling the operation from snap to snap, then what exactly is supposed to improve while he stands on the sideline? That is the question now hanging over this whole situation. And it becomes even more important after Jaylon Johnson publicly said Sanders had already shown enough to deserve serious consideration for the starting job. Because think about the logic here. Cleveland can say Sanders still needs work. That is fair. He is a young quarterback. Nobody should expect him to have every part of the NFL game mastered immediately. But if the areas he needs to improve are areas that only really get tested in live football situations, then keeping him out of those situations creates another problem. You cannot fully learn how to control a huddle by watching somebody else do it. You cannot recreate every third down situation from the sideline. You cannot simulate the pressure of getting the call, reading the defense, changing protection, managing the clock, and still delivering the football when 11 defenders are trying to ruin the play. That is why the decision not to play him starts raising eyebrows. And it is not only Browns fans asking this anymore. The discussion around Cleveland has reached the point where people are openly wondering what the real plan is for Shedeur Sanders. Is the team simply being patient? Are they protecting him? Are they convinced Deshaun Watson gives them a better chance right now? Or are they trying to avoid creating an even bigger quarterback controversy before the regular season begins? Nobody outside the building knows the full answer. And that is exactly why every decision gets picked apart. The Browns have created this pressure themselves. Once you tell people that Watson won because he is further ahead with the offense, then every choice you make with Sanders has to match that explanation. If he needs experience, fans are going to ask why he is not getting experience. If he needs to improve his operation, people are going to ask why he is not being put in situations where he can actually operate the offense. If he needs more reps, people are going to ask why those reps are limited. That is not conspiracy. That is simply people following the logic Cleveland has already given them. And this is where Jaylon Johnson's opinion makes the whole thing even more uncomfortable. Johnson already believes Sanders put enough on tape to deserve the nod. So from his point of view, this is not some quarterback who looked completely lost and needs to be hidden until he is ready. He saw enough positive football to believe Cleveland could have gone young. That does not mean Johnson knows the Browns' playbook better than the coaching staff. Of course he does not. But it does mean the football Sanders has shown is strong enough that people who understand the game are questioning why Cleveland is being so cautious. There is also another side to this that Cleveland cannot ignore. Every live rep Sanders does not get is one less chance for the Browns themselves to learn what they have. This team is still trying to figure out its future at quarterback. That is the biggest position in football. If you have a young quarterback on the roster who has shown flashes, who has fans behind him, and who has now received public support from an opposing Pro Bowl defender, why would you not want as much information as possible before the real games get serious? That does not mean throwing him out there carelessly. It means evaluating him. The Browns cannot answer the Shedeur Sanders question by hiding from the Shedeur Sanders question. At some point, they are going to need real evidence. They are going to need to know how he handles pressure when defenses start disguising coverage. They are going to need to know whether he can recover from a bad possession. They are going to need to know whether he can command veterans in the huddle when the game is moving fast. They are going to need to know whether the good moments we have already seen can hold up when the speed increases and the mistakes actually cost you games. And the only way to learn all of that is to let him play. That is why the idea that Sanders could simply sit and wait becomes harder to sell if Watson struggles. The Browns can preach patience right now because the regular season has not forced their hand yet. But once the games count, everything changes. If Watson is efficient, moves the offense, and wins, Cleveland can point to the results. But if the offense starts stalling and Sanders is still standing there with a helmet in his hand, then the questions are going to come fast. And Jaylon Johnson's comments will be sitting right in the middle of that storm, because Johnson has already planted the idea that Cleveland may be delaying something that eventually happens anyway. He believes Sanders could take over at some point. That is not a guarantee. It is one player's football opinion. But coming from a high-level defender, it is enough to make people watch every Watson possession differently. One rough quarter becomes a debate. One bad game becomes a quarterback controversy. Two bad games and suddenly every press conference starts with the same question. And this is where Jaylon Johnson's prediction becomes the part Cleveland really does not want hanging over the season. Because he did not just say he liked what he saw from Shedeur Sanders. He went a step further and made it clear that, in his view, Sanders could eventually take that job anyway. That changes the entire feeling around this quarterback situation. Because now the Browns are not only defending why Deshaun Watson is starting, they are also dealing with the possibility that this decision may only be temporary. That is the uncomfortable part. If Shedeur Sanders was clearly not ready, nobody would be talking like this. If he looked completely overwhelmed, if he could not handle the speed, if he was making reckless decisions, if he looked like he needed a full year on the bench, then the Browns could easily explain what they are doing. But that is not the picture people are seeing. Sanders has shown enough calm, enough control, enough flashes, and enough ability that a Pro Bowl defensive back like Jaylon Johnson is already looking at him and thinking, this guy could take over eventually. And once that idea gets out there, it is hard to put it back in the box. Because now every Deshaun Watson performance is going to be judged against a bigger question. Not just, did Watson play well? But, was that good enough to keep Shedeur Sanders on the bench? Those are two completely different standards. A veteran starter normally gets room to work through mistakes. He might have a bad quarter. He might miss a few throws. He might need time to get comfortable. But when the backup quarterback already has this much attention around him, every mistake gets louder. That is the reality Cleveland created. And Johnson's comments make that pressure even stronger because he represents something Browns fans have been waiting to hear from outside Cleveland. This is not just somebody who became a Shedeur supporter because of the name, the attention, or the hype. This is an NFL defender who watched the quarterback position from the other side of the ball and still came away believing Sanders had earned more respect. That matters. Defensive players do not care about the quarterback debate the same way fans do. They care about who is difficult to defend. That should make Cleveland think. Because if Sanders is already showing enough to earn that kind of respect while still being young and still developing, then his ceiling becomes the real story. Watson is supposed to be the polished option. He is supposed to be the quarterback who gives Cleveland stability right now. Sanders is supposed to be the player still growing into the job. But what if the gap between them is already small? What happens when Sanders improves the exact things Cleveland says he still needs to improve? That is when this could turn fast. One good week of practice from Shedeur will get attention. One bad game from Watson will make people restless. If both happen at the same time, the Browns are going to have a problem. And if Watson has 2 rough games while Sanders continues looking sharp behind the scenes, suddenly the quarterback room does not feel settled at all. It feels like a countdown. That is why Jaylon Johnson saying he expects Sanders to eventually take over is such a powerful part of this story. He is not guaranteeing anything. He is not inside the Browns building. He is not making the lineup, but he is looking at the situation like a football player and seeing the possibility that Cleveland eventually ends up where a lot of people already think they should be, with Shedeur Sanders on the field. And from Cleveland's perspective, that possibility becomes even more complicated because of how much pressure already exists around Watson. The Browns are not starting a veteran with a clean slate. They are starting a quarterback who has dealt with injuries, interruptions, expectations, and constant questions. That does not mean he deserves to be written off, but it does mean he has less room for a slow start than most quarterbacks would have in this situation. Because every struggle will bring Sanders into the conversation. If Watson misses an open receiver on 3rd down, somebody will ask what Shedeur would have done. If Cleveland goes through a full quarter without moving the ball, fans will start looking toward the sideline. If the Browns lose a game because the offense cannot finish drives, the pressure will explode. And once that happens, the coaches will not be able to simply say, Watson is our starter, and expect the conversation to disappear. Results are going to decide how loud this gets. If Watson plays well, this becomes a much smaller story. Winning changes everything. If he controls the offense, protects the football, creates scoring drives, and gives Cleveland a chance to win consistently, then Shedeur can develop without the entire city demanding a change every week. But if Watson looks shaky, then Johnson's prediction suddenly starts feeling very real. And there is another part Cleveland has to think about. The locker room notices performance too. Players know when a quarterback is moving the offense. They know when somebody brings energy. They know when a young player is improving. They know when the same mistakes keep showing up. The coaches can control the depth chart, but they cannot control what players see every day. That is why this season could become very interesting very quickly. Shedeur Sanders does not need to create a controversy himself. He does not need to say anything dramatic. He does not need to demand the job. All he has to do is keep improving and stay ready. If Watson handles business, Cleveland moves forward. If Watson struggles, Sanders becomes the easiest answer sitting right there on the roster. And Jaylon Johnson already sees where this could be going. That is what should make Browns fans pay attention. Because sometimes a quarterback change happens after months of debate. Sometimes it happens because of injury. Sometimes it happens because a season starts slipping away. And sometimes the young quarterback simply keeps getting better until the coaching staff can no longer justify keeping him behind the veteran. At the end of the day, this entire Browns quarterback situation is coming down to one simple thing: results. Cleveland can explain the decision any way it wants. They can talk about experience, command of the offense, operation, communication, timing, protections, and everything else that goes into playing quarterback in the NFL. But once the regular season starts, none of those explanations will matter if Deshaun Watson does not produce. And that is exactly why Jaylon Johnson stepping into this conversation matters so much. Johnson did not have to say anything. He is not a Browns player. He is not part of Cleveland media. He is not trying to win over Browns fans. He is an opposing Pro Bowl defensive back who looked at what Shedeur Sanders put on tape and came away believing the young quarterback had already done enough to deserve the opportunity. That does not automatically make Johnson right, but it absolutely makes the Browns' decision harder to dismiss as obvious. And now Cleveland has put itself in a position where every Watson performance is going to be judged against Shedeur Sanders sitting behind him. If Watson comes out firing, moves the offense, converts third downs, protects the football, and wins games, then Cleveland can point to the scoreboard and say they made the right call. That is the cleanest answer possible. But if the offense starts slowly, if the same problems return, if drives keep dying, and if Watson looks like a quarterback still trying to find something that has been missing for years, the Browns are going to have a very different problem on their hands. Because Shedeur Sanders will still be there. He will still be young. He will still be developing. He will still have fans behind him. And now he will also have something else. Public respect from players around the league who have actually lined up against Cleveland and studied what these quarterbacks look like on the field. That is why this story is not going away just because Cleveland named a starter. Naming QB1 does not end a quarterback controversy when half the football world still believes the competition was close. It does not end the debate when the younger quarterback keeps showing flashes. And it definitely does not end the debate when an opposing defender comes out and basically says he would have gone in the other direction. The Browns may have made their decision, but now they have to live with the pressure that comes with it. And the pressure on Watson is going to be massive. This is not a normal situation where a veteran gets a month to settle in before anybody starts asking questions. Cleveland fans have already watched this story for years. They have already waded through injuries, missed games, comeback attempts, and promises that things could finally turn around. Patience is not unlimited. If Watson looks good, people will give him credit. But if he struggles, the crowd is not going to quietly sit there and wait forever while Shedeur Sanders stands on the sideline. And that is where Jaylon Johnson's prediction becomes so interesting. Because he believes Sanders could eventually take over. Maybe that happens later in the season. Maybe Watson plays well and it never happens at all. Maybe Sanders still has areas he needs to improve before Cleveland trusts him with the offense. All of those possibilities are real. But the fact that this conversation is already happening before the season even gets rolling tells you how fragile Cleveland's quarterback situation really is. The Browns did not eliminate the competition. They just changed the scoreboard. Now Watson has the starting job, and Shedeur has the opportunity to keep developing behind him. But every week will add new evidence. Every practice matters. Every snap matters. Every game matters. And eventually Cleveland may reach a point where the decision becomes impossible to defend one way or the other. That is what makes this season so fascinating. If Watson proves everybody wrong, this could become his redemption story. If Shedeur keeps improving and eventually forces his way onto the field, this could become the beginning of something completely different for Cleveland. And if Jaylon Johnson ends up being right about where this is headed, people are going to look back at his comments and realize he saw the warning signs before the Browns were ready to act on them. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Jaylon Johnson is right? Should Shedeur Sanders have been the Browns' starter from the beginning? Or do you believe Cleveland made the right decision by giving Deshaun Watson the first shot? Drop your answer in the comments, because this quarterback debate is only getting started. And if you want more Browns updates, quarterback drama, and everything happening around Shedeur Sanders, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happens next.